Welcome to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. Each episode will tear down a myth, kick a social norm in the beanbag, gut punch a sex ed untruth, or destroy a poorly constructed relationship expectation. Get ready to unlearn all the crap you accepted as fact. Strap in for a mind-blowing revision on what sex is and what it can do. Prepare yourself for a whole new thought pattern when it comes to modern relationships. And now, here's your host, Jenny Simus, the Intimacy Ally, relationship expert and certified sex and intimacy coach.
Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. It is me, Jenny Simus Leaty, your Intimacy Ally, and I am joined today by this extraordinarily cool chick, Mistress Cas. She is an intersectional scientist, a practitioner, an educator, a love pleasure guide, and a mental health clinician who lives with her partners and dogs in San Antonio, Texas. Mistress Cas, welcome to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here finally.
Yay, of course. Now, Mistress Cas is another wonderful human that I get to know because of the Sexual Health Alliance. So shout out Sha. And really, I just want to jump right in with you and not waste too much time and just ask you, how did you get started in this work? What was the beginning of your origin story into this work?
It started pretty young. I'm from Long Island, New York, and I grew up in a very sex neutral, sometimes sex positive world, and got to experience like normalization of not being sexual or being sexual and like it all just being okay. And I, found my own interest in kink and sexuality pretty young too, like having kinky play as a kid with myself solo, like, and that was just a part of me and I never like thought it weird until, I moved to Virginia in the South and started to see that like in my teenage high school years that it's not so normal. And, at first professionally, I started out in public science, public health science and doing epidemiology work. And I love that science. But I realized I had a first love that was sexual health and sex education and even sex therapy. So I decided, okay, I'm going to become a scientist-practitioner in that field of sex therapy, mental health counseling, and sex education. And so now I'm an LPC associate level clinician and a certified sex therapist through Shaw, and working in that field and also still doing education and working as Mistress Cas as an erotic entrepreneur, because I'm a millennial and I need 5 careers.
That's right. That's right. You're a good little millennial, aren't you?
Yep. With the praise kink too.
Nice. So let me get back really quick to one of the earlier things that you said. You said that you started out kinky like as a kid. What did that look like? What were you getting into? I know you got some stories.
I do. It looked different. A lot of the times it would just be imagination, but there were plenty of like acting out play. How a lot of kids play doctor. I had my own unique version, which was doing some sexual interrogation of a 6-foot tall teddy bear.
Yeah. I'm sorry, say what?
Yep. I those big like carnival stuffed animals that like are just ginormous and like it was 3 times bigger than me at the time probably. And I was alone. I wasn't like, traumatized or anything like that at that point in time anyway. It was just me being creative and playing with the things that were in my head already. And I kind of kept that kink throughout my life. Like I really like doing like power exchange in like female-led relationships, that kind of stuff. And kind of started young with that and I've kind of kept it up.
Right.
Yeah.
So So on your journey, when you did move to Virginia, like what was different then? Did you have to like pack away parts of yourself?
I felt the pressure too.
Okay.
I was 14 and I started high school in Richmond, Virginia, in more of like what we called Stepford area of Richmond.
I believe
My
it.
Yeah, my mother is a single, never married, working mom, professional workaholic kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
um, from New York immigrant culture, and I was a goth little awkward bean at that age. But my mother was very much like, you do you.
Okay.
Uh, like
Props to
you
mom then.
Yeah, exactly. Like even if you have to like rebel against me a little bit, like
Mm-hmm.
like you do you. And she was very supportive of whatever I did as long as it was like, high quality. She was like, striving always like, you might be different than me as my daughter, but like you got to do good in whatever you choose to do.
Right.
So she was very much still, encouraging me to like dress super gothy
Mm-hmm.
in that way when we moved to Virginia. She was still encouraging me to be who I was, to do my like sex education and handing out condoms and little rape whistles in school. Like she was like
That's
encouraging
amazing.
the subversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was probably the main reason I didn't like go back into the closet. Because
Okay.
like I knew I was by the time I was 14,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew like I didn't know a word for non-monogamy, but like I knew I was, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew like all these different things about me, and so there was the urge to go back into the closet when I moved to the South,
Mm.
and luckily my mother was very supportive. I found a group of awkward kids that I loved to hang out with that were all awkward and different and unique in their own ways. So
Mm-hmm.
like I wasn't like I was like the only goth maybe in my friend group, but it was still a bunch of awkward, united, neurodivergent queer kids.
Awesome.
And that really
Yeah.
like allowed me to keep in my nest and keep that, and kind of bolster it up for trying to keep that as a professional in my adult
Mm-hmm.
life, because I am out, and I don't necessarily hide that I'm a kinkster or polyamorous or anything like that in my professional work. And I think
Right.
it's a strength, but it's also a privilege that like I'm white passing, and I come from a highly educated background that tends to get me a few more points in my favor,
Mm-hmm.
even if the being out stuff takes away a few points in academia or science circles.
Right. I gotcha. Well, I think it's fantastic that you felt, safe and secure enough to be out at that age. I mean, I knew those things about myself, but I did not feel that way. I didn't feel that way for a couple more decades. So that's pretty awesome that at 14 you had the wherewithal and like that encouragement to be you, you know?
Mm.
Whoosh.
Yeah,
So
the
what would you
fire
say
of the
to
New
the
York
kids?
women in New York immigrant culture just like was like, no, you can't.
Right? What would you say to the kids in Richmond, Virginia now who are thinking like I can't be me. There's all this, political bullshit making it hard to be me. What would you want to share with them?
Like, I would generally say that your unique version of who you are is valuable and capable and worthwhile. And it's a fucking shame that there are people around you that don't deserve to see how awesome you are and that you might have to, worry about your safety with. But
Mhm.
hopefully you will get to a point one day where you can find the people who recognize that awesomeness.
Right.
That
Yeah.
it's out there. You can find your people
Right.
eventually.
Mm. So you found your people. You were in Virginia. How long, or did you stay there much longer after you graduated, or what did that next transition for you look like?
So I went to high school and undergrad in Virginia.
Mhm.
Went to a tiny women's college in the Virginia mountains, and then got the opportunity for in-state tuition for grad school in Texas.
Okay.
So I decided on Texas A&M University for my master's of public health and epidemiology, and went to College Station, little rural town in the middle of nowhere, and studied hard and went down the line of becoming an infectious disease scientist, especially with stigmatized illnesses like tuberculosis and STIs. And I loved the science. I even loved the rural health aspect of what I did because that was more of a specialty of mine. And it was weird too, because like here I am with like fake colored hair and tattoos and still professional goth at that point, like showing up in these rural health departments as like the infectious disease expert.
Right.
And it was awkward, but I learned that I did like Texas better than I had liked Virginia, because they'll be honest with you if they don't like you, but they'll also still work with you.
Really? Okay. That's a good thing to know, because I was going to ask you about that. Like, what was the shift like between Virginia and Texas? And you're saying even rural Texas.
Yeah. There's a frontier spirit in Texas that is a kind of like coming togetherness. So, you know, I say in Virginia, it's very much like bless your heart, stab you in the back. In Texas, they might not like you personally, but if you're smart, you're like good at what you do, you have something to give to the community or the relationship or whatever it is, they still recognize that value, you know, even if they don't like you. It's like they respect you, but they don't like you.
Okay, but they don't say like, "Oh, we like you," and then act like assholes behind your back.
Exactly. I'd rather have the honesty. And like that part reminds me of New York a little bit. Like, you know, thank you very much. Fuck you. Have a good day. Like, it's just, you know, I'm like, I appreciate that honesty. Yeah, I can work with that.
So, relationship-wise, how were things going while all these different, you know, phases and stages were happening? Were you having polyamorous relationships? Were you exploring, you know, different gendered relationships, or, you know, how was that going?
Yeah. I started having relationships with women and guys in high school. Tried to do some non-monogamy, didn't really know how to do it well or ethically, so it was messy until like I learned the word polyamory at like 21, 22. And that, like, learning that kink and non-monogamy and polyamory were things that existed in the real world around 21, 22. It wasn't just internet stuff. It was like I had the internet circles down. Like I was enjoying all the different things out there. But I like had this thing that like alternative sexuality outside of queerness was reserved for the chat rooms. And so around 21, 22 is when I came to Texas, and I found a group of people in the middle of rural Texas that were non-monogamous and kinky and super spiritual too as well. And they like opened the world to me in the sense that like there are others like you. And from then on, like there of course was some traumatic relationships here and there. There was of course, you know, some monogamous cowboys trying to like, you know, convince me that I was going to be happier in some traditional monogamous marriage or something here and there.
Like they do, you know.
Yeah. But I kept keeping on. And I've had over a decade or so now of like really dedicated, serious relationships at all sorts of structures and phases. You know, whether it was just a kinky dynamic without romance and sex, or maybe it is a comet relationship with my partner I first met when I moved to Texas in like we don't really see each other, but we, we still love each other and we still connect spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have my husband I'm married to, and he's my colored boy as well. And I have 2 other serious partners, long-term relationships. And it's beautiful building the chosen family that I envisioned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, chosen family was normalized a lot in my upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
coming from like where I grew up, and doing this different version is just like, at this point I've built it a little bit more. It's like a little more reliable and structured, and like has been going on for a little while now.
Right.
And being able to like come into that chosen family, even though it's so different looking than like what typical family looks like, has really
Mm-hmm.
been a blessing.
Yeah. And you get to make it totally your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's your rules and it's your
customizable.
Boundaries, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
And everyone else's, but
right. But I mean, like, you get to say, like, this is what means family to me. It doesn't have to be blood. It doesn't have to be, court aligned marriage, what have you. Like, it can be other things.
And that's what I realized too, that like, one other reason why I love Texans is they get that chosen family thing, especially the military Texans, which is my husband's family.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Like, he's generational Texan military family. But because they were a military family, they had chosen family that was just the family that was in the same city they were stationed in almost all the time. And they worked together with a lot. And they became family,
right?
Even though they weren't blood or legally related to them. And so they, like, my husband's Texan family was very much like open and accepting, even though if they didn't quite understand things. When we had our wedding, they were like, so you have like 2 trans women in your bridal party? I'm like, yeah. Okay, well, if someone has a problem, they can get off my property.
There you go.
And I'm like,
yeah,
I love you.
Nice. That's awesome. So I do want to get back to one thing that you said, but before that, I want to get into, how did Mistress Cas come to be?
It's been a journey.
Okay.
I started out with using a different name in kink. I started out, I think it was Miss Blythe was the first name I used.
All right.
And
Blythe?
Blithe is, I think, I have how I spelled it.
All right.
But I thought I couldn't necessarily be out as a kinkster while working in public health, due to like ethics clauses in public service in Texas. And so I kind of hid behind that a little bit. I discovered a little bit more of my like succubusness, my succubus nature, and started going by Miss Succuba for a long time.
Okay.
And that was my name for like a good chunk of time. And then when I decided to leave public health, and like I was going to start working towards becoming a mental health practitioner and sexual health professional, I decided to start going by Miss Cas, and like own who I was, because my real name is Casandra, so Casandra,
right?
And everyone calls me Cas. That's just what I go by. But it started out as Miss. I like using Miss. I feel like it's very friendly. It's been a very like attractive title to me from like my Northeast roots in the US. But I realized that's different in the South. Miss is like little miss. It's not like a full woman.
Okay. It's not like how when you have your kids, you're like, that's Miss Cas, that's Mr. Michael, blah, blah, blah. Not like that.
That's more just a teacher thing here in the South. Like,
okay. Good to know.
Yeah. And so when I got married and I collared my boy, it felt like at that point I needed to step up in a way. And I also found it as like a sort of like challenge to myself, because I was getting married. I was his mistress, and all these different things. But it felt a little imposter-y to like take it on at first. But I decided that like, well, I'm going to become a mistress and master. I'm going to become that. And I'm going to use that name to like guide me towards that goal. And even though I'm a little uncomfortable with it right currently. And that was like 3 years ago, 3 years ago, when I went from miss to mistress.
All right.
Like, it's a growth journey. Everyone can like change their names as they go through different phases and different ways of being.
Absolutely.
I encourage people to be creative with their names.
All right. Well, now that you told me that part, now I want to get to the thing that you've said twice that I don't know if all of my listeners or many of my listeners or whatever are going to know what you're talking about. You said you collared your boy. I want to talk about what is collaring.
Yeah. So collaring, I'm going to be, it might sound a little blasphemous, but like think about a priest collar. Think about that little piece of cloth is a representation of them serving a higher master, and that they are devoted to a path, they are devoted to a mission, and they wear that as a reminder, as a symbol, and as a powerful tool too. And it's the same sort of thing, but in alternative relationships sometimes. Mostly kink, but you might see self-collaring and collaring for other reasons besides kink sometimes. Even people just like the aesthetic, it looks cool. But in kink, it's usually a symbol of commitment. Like a priest collar. It can be a commitment to a relationship. It can be a commitment to a dynamic that, maybe doesn't have like a romantic relationship attached to it. But maybe it's just a play collar. You just use it in the bedroom or in the dungeon. But, for me, a collar at that point in time means that I am engaging in a 24/7 power exchange relationship. Where I am going to most of the time be in the dominant role and expect to care for my submissive and to receive their service and everything. And yeah, it can look different relationship to relationship, but that's how it looks for mine.
So can you give any examples of like what that looks like in daily life?
So that for some of my relationships where I've collared people, it's the first thing they do in the morning is send me a wake up hello text, and the last thing they do at night is like saying goodnight. There's like a rhythm or a routine or a ritual to it.
I like that, a ritual to it.
Yeah. For me, I really like, receiving my morning caffeine as like my first cup of caffeine in the morning from my colored person, and, some ritual in their protocol around it usually. So like there's a little bit of a like devotion, reverence sort of energy in my dynamics. Like I tend to be a little more of a goddess mistress energy.
So it's kind of like a tribute.
Yes. And, if we're doing a high protocol sort of thing, there might be downturned eyes while they do it. And they might, have to have like proper posture while they do it. And things like that. And then it also includes like me being there for the submissive in sort of caretakery sort of ways sometimes, depending on the relationship. So like with my one partner, there is a little bit more of a caretakery vibe, and I help organize their feelings and like keep them to a growth standard and, support them in that growth. And then
That's
I have
beautiful.
other relationships. Yeah. Like other relationships don't need that, but for that one, it really is powerful within that relationship.
Right. Now, when you have these sort of power dynamics existing, 24/7, I'd love it if you could share like how, or it changes, I'm sure, depending on relationships. Everybody's different. But I feel like when people who are not in any kind of kink community or don't have the background think that that means that you are walking around in high heels and leather and the collar is always on and that you are spanking someone, for every act that happens and that there is sex happening all the time.
I wish.
Let's combat some of these myths because just simply energy wise and like the fact that you all have to go to work, like that's not legit possible for but a fraction of people, I think. So what would you like to say to people who are hearing about all of this for the first time? What kind of things would you like to say? Well, here's what you might be thinking, but here's what it's more like.
Like anything in media, like kink is dramatized in media. Like everything.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, to your point, because you have like a military husband or you're in a military community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember the first time I watched Army Wives, the show, and they were like, we need to mobilize the FRG. And I was like, are they? Because I was a military wife for 11 years. I was like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, this is so dramatic. And then my other friend who was a military wife was like, well, yeah, I mean, they gotta spice it up. They don't want to just sit here watch us all being sad that our husbands are deployed and like we're stuck here with the kids. Like, come on now, they got to do something spicy.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
yeah. So okay, bring it.
Yeah. So like we're gonna like demystify the fact that like it has to be super spicy, turned up to 11, 24/7. There are moments of super spice, and they should be regular to keep that like dynamic going. But there needs to be a fluidity.
Right.
There needs to be an allowance for all aspects of who we are, not 100% of who we are is Mistress Cas. Like for me, like, there's a tiny part of me that's just like a slut. There's a part of me that's a little bit of a sex kitten. Like maybe a large part of me is dominant in some sort of flavor. But even like me, I am not that 24/7 all the time. And so there needs to be allowances for the flexibility and fluidness of who we are as people. And our needs in the moments of who we are change as well. So, some days we might have a higher protocol sort of day, which means that like I am in tip-top dominant form and there might be a fun beating here and there. There might be some sexy times here and there. And them wearing the cute apron as they do the domestic duties kind of thing.
Excellent.
That's a great day though, when you don't have other shit to take care of.
Right. That's a day off.
Yeah, that's a day off. Yeah. You might have an element of that here and there in other days. You might, have a consistent morning ritual, for example, like they bring you your morning cup of caffeine. But, my submissive still has to go be a badass in their profession. They still have to take charge in their life. And I often find it actually helpful to use my house dynamics, like my values and the larger mission I have as a kinkster, as a sort of like replacement for me in 24/7 dynamics. So instead of being like, you have to be in service to me, your mistress, 24/7, it is you are in service to me and my house 24/7. So my house has values like fun and love and compassion and honor. And if you are committed to those values, even when you're at work doing your thing, then you are still in service to me. I still view that as service. You are still doing your best and doing your shit and like taking care of business and everything and doing it with this, fun, loving, compassionate style.
Right.
Then like we're still in the dynamic.
And honoring my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can dig it.
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to jump back a little bit. I know it's like my boom,
Yeah,
boom, boom,
no,
boom, boom,
I
pinball
got
brain.
ADHD. I can do that.
Awesome. Yay. Um, I wanted to jump back a little bit into your research career or your epidemiology career and like how that kind of shifted into the more it's more like talk therapy career
Mhm.
now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What were you doing there? And then how did that kind of end or shift?
Mhm. Um, so I was a epidemiologist for the state health department. And so a lot of the time that was more the rural counties, the counties that didn't have their own necessarily health departments. So they like defaulted to the state level. Um,
Okay.
and I focused a lot of my work earlier was more on, foodborne illnesses. But
Mm-hmm.
I eventually worked for a longer time in the area of tuberculosis. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And tuberculosis is one of the oldest diseases of this world,
Mm-hmm.
alongside syphilis. And
Mm-hmm.
we are very much, still affected by tuberculosis to this day. A lot of people think it's not a thing in the United States anymore, but we still have tuberculosis
Yeah,
here.
I thought it was not a thing. So
Yeah,
yeah, this is hella interesting.
yeah. And Texas has a little more than some other states. Some states in the United States only have a couple of cases a year,
Okay.
and they don't need a lot of manpower or science power to kind of contain those uh, cases in terms of
Mm-hmm.
spreading. And so a lot of what I did was the science back end of epidemiology for tuberculosis. So, like, understanding the genetic patterns between this case and this case, and look, the genetic pattern says that there's probably a missing link in between. There's probably a case out there we haven't found yet.
Hmm.
Or coordinating with health departments around like testing an entire school who had an exposure,
Okay.
or leading. Even I did a lot of also like I was cross trained because everyone is in public health in disaster uh, services.
Okay.
So doing a lot of field interviews after a disaster too on like health determinations and figuring out how the community is doing with their health and all that kind of stuff, and combined with
Mm-hmm.
crunching all that data behind a
Mm-hmm.
spreadsheet 24/7, like I got to see the gaps in the public health system. I got to see
Mm.
that like people's mental health was failing. People's
Right.
social support networks were failing them.
Damn right.
And yes, infectious disease science and control is important. Uh, but I got to thinking that I think mental health and social support is a little more important. Um,
Okay.
and I also was like a little sick of being behind a spreadsheet 24/7. I wanted to relate to people more.
Hell
um,
yeah.
so I was like, okay, I feel like I would be better doing my service to the world to be
Mm-hmm.
putting my skills to use in this different field. I'm still going to be a
Mm-hmm.
scientist. I'm still going to be an epidemiologist. I'm still going to want to do research, but I want to have relations with the world with this science that I
Mm-hmm.
understand and use it to connect with people, not just use it to like make a pretty report that a few people might read, but not a lot.
Right. So what was the timing of that? Like when did that shift occur? And was there anything to that?
There was luck to that.
Okay.
So I left public health officially a year into my mental health counseling degree program. I
Okay.
left it officially September 2019.
Shut up.
Yeah. So I missed the Super Bowl of epidemiology. Like I worked through Ebola in Texas, and so like
Oh my
that
God.
I got to see like how Texas was coping with just Ebola, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? And this helped me realize like it's fascinating stuff, but I'm better in this other field. So I
Right.
left in September, and a couple months later, COVID happens, and I'm like, so sitting in my apartment just going, I'm so glad I got out at that particular moment, because if I had still been working in that field, I would have been, I was already burnt out. I would have been crips.
Right.
Yeah.
It would have been like, see ya, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. I don't know what's happening, but I'm out.
Yeah. So instead, I,
Goodness.
was just focused on my studies
Mhm.
for mental health counseling, finished that degree virtually because of COVID.
Right. I was about to say, did it start virtually or did it become virtually?
It became virtual. I went to
Mhm.
school for my counseling program in here in San Antonio,
Mhm.
and it was not supposed to be virtual, and it just so happened to be. But it actually worked out well for me because of like my specialty in sex therapy. A lot of my
Mhm.
clients are virtual, and so like it
Okay.
gave me a lot of experience, like the fact that we had our classes during COVID in virtual
Mhm.
care and how to like connect the energy across virtual.
Because it's different.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible like some people think.
No, it's not. So did you also go, was that also at A&M or was that somewhere else?
It was a different A&M. So
Okay.
in Texas, we had the A&M system, and Texas A&M is usually the main one in College Station, but we have Texas A&M San Antonio, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Commerce, all these different ones.
Okay.
I went to A&M San Antonio for my counseling program.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we've gotten there. Now, so are you at this point, are you doing like mistress classes, like dungeon work, anything like that at the same time as also learning to be a counselor?
Sort of. I started my education work more in the area of consent education and doing
Okay.
small support group kind of structure stuff within the kink community. Back when I was dealing with my own crazy times of my life, I founded a Crazy Kinksters mental health support group. And
I love it.
yeah, and that was something I maintained for a long time and is still going today. But I built that, and I also got to see though that like through working in that mental health support group, how important understanding consent practices were, and how important just discussing these various consent topics is for all sorts of all communities, not just kink communities.
Yeah.
So I started my education journey actually being a volunteer educator for Consent Academy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and practice honing my craft of adult education around a relational sort of topic, working with them and partnering with the other educators there and learning from the students too, honestly, in those classes.
Nice.
And that was, during heat of pandemic times too. So it really like gave me an outlet besides my schooling to practice education. And that doing that consent education, like, and taking it really seriously for a couple of years is actually kind of what informed me going towards SHA. Because I was like, I want to be a mental health counselor. Probably want to talk about sex. I don't know, maybe. And then got to talking more about consent and like the intricacies of like power dynamics and managing information sharing. And I was like, oh, I really like talking about these topics and everything. Like maybe I should actually get like training in this realm of like relational and sex therapy. And so I found SHA.
Right.
And I started my SHA sex therapy certification before I finished my master's in counseling.
Yeah, I noticed you were rocking both.
Yep.
My God.
I like to stay busy. I inherited that like workaholism from my mother.
So where were the consent workshops you were doing through? What was that called again?
The Consent Academy. And it's
The
all
Consent Academy.
mostly online. They have some stuff in Seattle, but mostly online.
Okay. Yeah, and they're still existing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They're a great organization. They're still offering classes, and they usually offer their consent basics class for free once-ish a month. So it's a great group of people.
Fantastic. So now you're in school and you're doing SHA.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? You said, oh, thank goodness I inherited this workaholic thing from my mom. But really, how was that? And were you also still doing like public service or public health work as well?
I was doing a little public health consulting work here and there just to make some money.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I had mostly left that behind at that point, and I was focusing on mental health and sexual health as my like thing I was gonna get into.
Okay.
I think doing the sex therapy certification at the same time I was still doing my master's was good for me. I don't think it would be good for everyone because it was a lot of work. But
yeah.
I found my counseling program not enough. I found my counseling program to just, it left me craving more knowledge. It left me craving and more curious. And so I needed an outlet to go find that satisfaction and curiosity and learning new things. So it worked out pretty well for me because I would have, a topic class on, adolescent development, and then I would go back into the SHA coursework and look up like adolescent sexual stuff and like how sexual development proceeds in that and those topic things in the SHA coursework, so that I could like be creating this sort of intersectional view of my classwork as I was doing it, without, and then also like it allowed me to be fully certified still early in my career too, which I think has been helpful.
Yeah. So did you go further way to like do like the ASECT certification as well?
Not yet. That's in plan.
Okay.
Yeah. So like part of my next plans is I'm going to be starting my doctorate in, yeah.
I feel like you did tell me that at some point, but like you do so much that I'm like, it's like some of it had to sift out and now it's coming. It's like, oh yeah, she did say that.
Yeah. But yeah,
oh my gosh,
I'm going to be starting my doctorate soon, and I'm going to be hopefully going towards like diagnostics and assessment for like neurodivergence and sex topics in adults. So
yes, so needed.
Yes.
Yes.
Like we do not have enough resources in that area for sure.
We don't have anything when it comes to, kids who are going through puberty in those situations. And I have found like 3 books and one person who was actually at one of the SHA conferences, the BIPOC conference, and she's friends with Jet Setting Jasmine. That's like the only resources I've found so far. And, my son who's nonverbal on the autism spectrum is going through puberty right now. And I'm like, we need to find more things.
Yes, we do.
We need to create more things to help people and to understand that, they have sexual identities. Like they may not express them the same way that a neurotypical person would, but they're there. Trust me. Like, I just want you to know they are there, and we have to encourage and nurture them and make sure that they're being safe and also allowed to have those identities.
Yes.
Like, we don't like what's the word? Infantilize them. Yeah. Like, it's kind of like it happens to people who are disabled, have special needs, whatever the moniker you want to use, and the elderly. Like, we just like infantilize them and take away any sexual expression.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to that whole idea that moralistic judgment of sex. Sex is a risky, dangerous thing. So only like fully functioning good adults can take care of that risk.
Right.
I'm like,
and they must not have that desire if they're not, this, and this. These prescribed attributes must be there if they are going to have some kind of want for this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just playing. It's just fine.
Yeah. No, and like I got that myself when I was dealing with my own treatment for my bipolar disorder, like plenty of clinicians were like, oh, so is your non-monogamy an expression of your manias? I'm like,
for real?
Yeah.
So you give people an outlet that's not that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's why so many of us are leaning toward becoming clinicians, because there aren't enough out there that have that sensitivity and have the training to not ask fucking questions like that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No, like that is a way too common thing, that like sex is risk, sex is dangerous, or alternativeness is risk or danger. And
or an expression of your insanity somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is just bullshit. Sex can be, not always, can be a strength. And sexuality, sensuality, and it, a lot of our body is just often suppressed in a lot of these worlds, like the desires of our bodies, and to like promote that desire is good, that desire can guide you and heal you in its own way, is a lot of what I try to bring into my work, whether that's education, consulting, therapy, whatever. Like, pleasure is a strength, and it can be maximized to become more of a strength if it isn't already.
Excellent. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. Like when you got started doing the courses, where were you finding the people who needed you, or where were you finding like the clients who wanted to go to these classes?
So a lot of my education work goes through the kink community. And so, FetLife events, and things like that, or finding the right groups in the different other platforms that are a little more hidden, like the Facebook groups, or the Discord servers, and things like that. You have to be very like diversified and be able to like detective out where these people are hanging out, because it is a little dangerous to be an alternative sexuality, not because the alternative sexuality is dangerous, because of the stigma.
Yes.
And so, people hide a little bit of it. And, over time, I found more resources and other educators who have pointed me to other resources, and things like, the existence of like forbidden tickets, which is like Eventbrite, but for kink events. And things like that allowed me to kind of like start reaching more and more people, and also just connecting with other people in this field, like you, like, especially the rabbi, like he and I are friends, and we can like coordinate on different things and help each other out, and be like, I'll promote this to your thing, I'll promote this to my thing. Like spreading the love in that kind of way.
Wait, who is the rabbi? What is this? I don't know who the rabbi is. What's happening? Did I miss a day at Shah? Is that what happened?
I do a lot. It's a kink name. The rabbi, he has synagogue, SIN, synagogue BDSM.
Shut up.
Yeah.
That's so punny. I don't know what to do.
It's so funny. But yeah, he's also a sex certified sex therapist, who has done that kind of stuff too. But he's not in Texas, like he's Ohio or some other place. And we get to like partner, and I love partnering with like people in other states and countries to diversify, as well as like make sure I'm not like viewing things through my like local lens, because kink and non-monogamy even have local cultural factors, like
absolutely.
And like, what one city uses as their messenger app, for example, for all their group chats is different from city to city. Even as simple as that, but it goes much larger too.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So you had started out kind of on FetLife and, the Discord servers. And Did you find people in person as well? Were
Mm-hmm.
you in like your local community doing that?
Yeah. Before pandemic, I was involved in various different Texas communities,
Mm-hmm.
and I found the local communities via like FetLife. Like I would find local events
Okay.
and go to local events and make local connections and real life connections. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just the internet anymore, and got to really make some good friends, long term friendships and partnerships. Um, and I moved to San Antonio in like 2015, 2016. I've been here since
Mm-hmm.
then. And just got really involved in the local community, or my little part of the local community, because it is a city of like almost 2 million people, so it's relatively
Your
big.
section. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, we got enough communities within the kink scene here to like people can move around.
Right.
um,
So now what is your big thing that you're doing as far as like coursework goes?
so my big focus is using kink or alternative sexuality relationships for healing.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm doing a self-coloring for as healing journey sort of focus. I
Mm-hmm.
also am doing a lot more, planning on unraveling a lot more into the um, power exchange, power dynamics, as like normalizing that um,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So that like that alternativeness as healing and alternativeness as just normal relationship dynamic. Uh,
Right.
and so I have the self-coloring as healing journey is a big part of my work, where I like give this idea that you can be your own master and guide
Mm.
yourself through
Mm-hmm.
a healing process, whatever for whatever mission that is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that means incorporating other people as well, but you are the master of your own journey.
Okay.
And like attuning to yourself and your own healing needs and listening to the different parts of you and what they need, via what is considered a kink practice of self-coloring.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
I know that when I was teaching Fantasy and Roleplay 101, there were a few women who came through who wanted to learn like how to better engage in like giving themselves like goddess fantasy,
Mhm.
just being able to exalt themselves. And I was like, how you feel about yourself, in general, just talking a little bit about their own inner thoughts. And we had to do work. We had to do a lot of work to get to that level where acceptance and then love and then, worship was like the way. So I feel like this would totally fall into that.
Yeah.
Whoosh.
Yeah. Well, and it can for a lot of people, and there's different ways of doing it, of course, too. Like if someone, you know, isn't into, you know, a sort of sacredness in things, maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
all just about like being better at your job, or being better at rope or better at a thing. Like you can use
Mm-hmm.
self-collaring for growth and development too, and self-mastery in
Right?
general.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's super duper spicy and
I like to think
edgy
so.
and like not it's fighting societal norms. It's saying I don't need this because when I think of collaring, like I do think of it as, it's marriage.
Mhm.
It's different form, right?
Mhm. And like for
Yeah.
me, it is. It can be less in serious, I guess, for some people,
Mhm.
but a lot of the time it is like it's a sign of some sort of commitment or bond. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so making that to yourself. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like how many more mentally healthy I hate saying that. Mentally sated people would there be if you had this affection and respect for yourself, you know?
Even if you just had to fake it some days, like but you still kept on providing that consistency to yourself. And like I'm going to show
Mhm.
up for myself even on the days I don't want to. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of healing, I think, for a lot of our inner children or inner teens.
Absolutely. Oh, okay. So for your practice, for the talk therapy, are you accepting new clients right now?
So I am not accepting new clients currently through Respark Therapy. I do take a couple of clients here and there through first responder therapy solutions.
Okay.
And they do take some insurances sometimes, depending on what you got. But
Okay.
I am also taking new clients coaching wise through Bold Hearts Education, which is my like education and consulting coaching kind of brand.
Okay. And how can people find you? How can they follow you? Where do you want them to go? And I'll
Yeah.
put all of it in the show notes, promise.
Okay. So I am Mistress Cas on most platforms. I am Mistress, I think, .cas on Instagram. I am Mistress
Mhm.
-Cas in FetLife. I have a Mistress Cas Facebook. And you can find me under any of those platforms. I'm welcome. You guys follow me anywhere, as long as you like respect that there's multiple communities looking at my stuff a lot of the time, not just kinksters and sluts alike, but like there's also some like more traditional folks in there sometimes. So like respect
Right.
everyone's like unique path. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
and I
And
encourage people to reach out.
websites and oh, sorry.
I encourage people to reach out. It's just what I said.
Oh, okay. Websites they should look up or
I do have a website for Bold Hearts Education. Um, the URL is not the greatest, but I'll give you the link so people can have it.
okay.
But generally, that Bold Heart brand you might see in some different places. I have Bold Hearts Education on Forbidden Tickets too for my classes. I promote my classes and post them on ForbiddenTickets.com.
Awesome. Well, all right. Well, Mistress Cass, it has been a pleasure having you on. I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening, and I hope you are walking away from this like, oh shit, I didn't know any of that. Yeah, woohoo! And I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of Storytime with the Intimacy Ally, where we say fuck no to the status quo. Thank you, my lovelies.
Thank you for tuning in to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. We hope you learned a bit more about putting the fire back in your romantic relationships, exploring communication and emotional readiness in all relationships, and how to expand your definition of intimacy so you can reach your relationship goals. Go to theintimacyally.com to subscribe and never miss an episode. Follow the links in the show notes to social media and events. Till next time, keep on learning, growing, and thinking. Storytime with the Intimacy Ally podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as health or mental health advice.